Good morning and welcome to today's SitRep, which is the 12th of October 2022. This is where I pour through news stories that I've found in the past, I don't know, what are we talking, like 3 days now? 2 days? And we have a chat about it from the perspective of prepping to, better prepare ourselves, I guess. I'm sorry about this light on YouTube. I'm in a hotel room. I'm obviously traveling for work as per usual. And I am struggling to get this light to stop flashing in my camera. But anyway, you can deal with it. It just looks like I'm more holier than thou today. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, at least, I'm holy. For those of you watching on Instagram, I probably look rather normal. And for those of you listening on the audio version on podcast, you have no fucking clue what I'm talking about right now, and that's fine. Trad Truther, do you leak dogs? Do you like dogs? Do you like dags? Yeah, I like dags. You're always asking that. Why is that? Anyway, that's your thing. That's your thing, man. And I'm not going to diss it. Let's jump into the stuff that's going on today or the past little minute. Aussie troops, are they heading to Ukraine? Well, this is an interesting story that came up on SBS News, which is one of the Australian news services. I don't know how you describe SBS to people who aren't in Australia. You've kind of got your commercial entities. There's like three main commercial entities or channels. Then you've got your communist propaganda government voice piece, being ABC News, the Australian Broadcast Corporation. And I'm joking, obviously, that sometimes they report good news. And then you got SBS, which is kind of like your fringy, sort of like out there type news, I guess. More focused on the minorities. Anyway, SBS News. Government considers sending troops to train Ukrainian forces after appalling Russian attacks on Kiev. So let's backpedal a second here and talk about the attacks that have happened in the Ukraine, because I don't think that had happened last time I did the chat. In fact, the last time I did a SitRep, I think the bridge had just got hit, and I was saying, hey, there's going to be some sort of reaction from this. And, was there a reaction? Buddy. Yeah, they had a bit of a reaction when they obviously started bombarding Ukraine. So over the past 48 hours. So the news of these bombings was coming into me. I was up in Brisbane for work yesterday, the day before, Monday. And as I was sort of journeying home, so Monday afternoon, I started getting reports of these attacks. And at first I was like, this is unverified. I'm not seeing much on it. And I started seeing social media videos and things like that on it from different sources. And I was like, okay, like that's still pretty unverified in my eyes. And then official reporting started coming out. So obviously we've seen a series of attacks, missile attacks throughout Ukraine happen in the past 48 hours. There was some reporting on it this morning that there were more hitting in, but that was very much unverified, those reports from this morning. So anyway, number of attacks that have happened. International community has condemned it, unsurprisingly. And in the face of that, we've got the Albanese government is considering sending troops to help Ukrainian forces, which is pretty in the wheel space of what Australian troops are known for doing. We do send training teams around the world quite often. This is not an odd occurrence. It is just very interesting that we're doing it into the Ukraine right now, that we're starting to gear it up towards that space there. So we'll see what comes of it, whether we actually send over a training team or not. I would think that Australia would. I was talking to some friends last night about this, my kind of assessment on it, and this is just a initial reaction, like, whoa, okay, we're going to send troops over the training team. What's actually happening here? Without digging into it too much or without pulling out any more information, what I'm seeing here is the reluctance maybe of a few nations to officially send in troops for training purposes or otherwise, who are involved in NATO. So Australia is not a signatory to NATO. So we're kind of that grey space where we can go, okay, we can send our troops in. If something happened to our troops, technically it's not going to trigger Article 5. However, I'm not really sure that then NATO is not looking to trigger Article 5 at this point. Part of those attacks, allegedly, the German embassy in Kiev was hit. I believe in Kiev, was damaged. Now, that embassy has been emptied for quite some time, so there was 0 staff there, according to the report that I was reading. But the fact that that was coming out and that Germany was making a bit of a deal about that, they're like, hey, our embassy got hit. Like, this is kind of a big deal. You can start to make this line between Germany embassy, which is sovereign German territory. An embassy is essentially that country's land within another country, being hit, being attacked, and that being a trigger to actually instigating Article 5. It's a long stretch. I'm going to admit that's a very long stretch, but these are the sorts of things that I look at and I go, okay, well, that could start to pull on some strings here, and here. Again, like, the purpose of this channel and why I put this information out is not to freak out people. It's so we can start to see which way the wind's blowing and try and figure out things a little bit better for ourselves. So anyway, that's what I'm seeing from this theater at the moment. And obviously, Australia's starting to look over there and actually putting boots on the ground, not in a war fighting capacity. Just really ram that one home for anyone who's like, wow, we're putting troops on the ground, Australia's going to war. No, we do this quite often. This is not anything new for Australia to do, to send training missions out, but it is still a very interesting step in what I would say is the wrong direction for Australia, just personally. One of my sources sent me this. This is from the aspistrategist.org.au, talking about Australia's fuel reserves. So I've talked about Australia's fuel reserves in the past. It's something that I'm really quite interested in from the perspective of being more prepared, because my kind of look on it, and a lot of people will agree with this, and one of my friends actually sent me a government report on this, which essentially all points to the same direction. Kind of confirmatory bias, I guess, for me at least, is that Australia's strategic fuel reserves are essentially non-existent. They're woefully inadequate, and they're not stored here in Australia. There is some stored here in Australia, but the main part is not stored here. It's just basically paper fuel products that are stored over in the US. And that even if it was stored here and we were to utilize it for strategic purposes, i.e. warlike purposes, it would not last very long. So anyway, this is a piece that came out from the ASPI Strategist, talking about Australia's fuel reserves and how they're pretty low, and actually some ideas and some rumblings and some overtures talking about ways of boosting Australia's energy resilience, which is good. I'm glad that organisations like this and the government perhaps even is starting to look at this and go, yeah, actually, we're pretty piss poor in this part of the world here. We're as in fuel reserves in this part of the world. Let's start to build this up a little bit, make the country a little more resilient. I love those words coming out when they're talking about resiliency in different sectors like energy and stuff like that. So that was actually, like, for me, this is kind of like a good news piece coming out of the Strategist. Australia's fuel reserves don't have to keep running on empty was the title of that article. So if you want to go check it out. It also, I'll just read the first little part of that. For decades, Australia's faith in globalisation and economic liberalism ensured that discussions about resilience focused on recovery from short-term disasters. So I love how they hit that out of the ballpark right away, right there. I'm like, yeah, Australia really does rely on globalism, on the moving of products cheaply and quickly throughout the world, where utterly beholden to it, and we really need to start rethinking that as a country. Back over to, apologise, like I'm all over the shop today. I just sort of pushed the Australian ones up to the top. But back over to the Ukraine now. Belarus looks like they are joining the fray. So they've just signed a joint regional troop deployment with Russia, saying, which essentially means, yeah, we're putting our troops in now as well. Is that a big deal? Yes and no. I mean, Belarus, this is for those who don't know, the country that sits to the north of Ukraine. This is where Russia actually utilized Belarus to pre-position a lot of its troops before they invaded into Ukraine. But Belarus maintained that they were like, hey, we're not part of this. This is not us. They never condemned it, obviously. They're very much in bed with Russia, but they were never officially part of it. But now it looks like they are going to be part of it. On top of this, there's a number of releases that Belarus have put out that are overtures to war. Essentially, they're saying, hey, Ukraine's doing this. Ukraine's bombed our bridges across into our country here. They've attacked actually some of our infrastructure, I think was the wording that they actually used. And they have mined the roads to the north. So they're impeding civilian movement. They're doing this, blah, blah, blah. So you can see them laying the path right now, verbally, for them to actually move in and start physically entering into this war. So Belarus now looks like they will 100% enter into this war. Judging by, again, going against what I usually do, judging by what they say, I'm looking at that and going like, well, clearly they're beating the war drum here. But what are they actually doing? Not a lot of information coming out about that, but they have apparently signed this agreement now with Russia. Peter Rouse, good morning to you on YouTube. What do you expect when... I can't actually read my comments because I had to move my screen because I'm so used to having like 50 screens in front of me. When Ukraine commit terrorist acts, yes. Well, I think at this point, pointing blame and saying like, well, this person did this person did that. It's a little bit of a moot point. Countries are at war at the moment, so yeah, they're doing nefarious things to each other. But as I said, when I pointed out the attack on the bridge, the Crimean bridge, like that will have a reaction, and that's exactly what we saw. Jackson Ang says, do you know about Resilient Cities Network made by Rockefeller Foundation? Has to do with sustainability, climate agenda. Just came to mind when you mentioned resiliency in Australia. No, I don't really know about that. Might have to look into it. All right, Moldova, staying in this kind of area now. Moldova anti-president protests have been removed from the capital. So security forces dispersed a protest camp in the center of Moldovan capital. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Chisinau, I think it's pronounced, on Sunday. So they're basically going against the current president, the anti-president of Moldova. Not that this is a huge deal. This might factor into the entire situation that's going on in this part of the world. But I like to highlight these sort of protests and things like that are going on at the moment. Again, it's my assessment that protests will increase in frequency as we continue forward. Actually, I just had one of my friends send me a message, very, to me, slightly amusing message like, hey, I'm going over to Europe and going backpacking for 2 months tomorrow night. Just decided to do it. Is there anything I should know? And I'm like, have you been watching my SitReps or like watching any news lately? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, cool. Good to know. I know where I'm starting at now. Okay, here's some things you might want to consider. But one of the things I said to them was like, hey, if you're going to be in and around cities throughout Europe, just know that there is a threat, or I think there's going to be an increased threat of civil disorder, especially throughout Europe. And coming into winter, I think we're going to see more cost of living, more energy crisis type protests that are happening. Anyway, that's another example of that. Ukraine has stopped exporting electricity to EU as of yesterday, or 2 days ago their time, but yesterday our time, I think. Am I getting that right? Anyway, that's because of the attacks. So those attacks have been on a lot of critical infrastructure throughout Ukraine, but a lot of the reports coming out that they've been hitting some of their power plants, some of their thermo power plants. So, you know, a lot of the electricity that is still flowing from Ukraine into Europe has been cut, or some of it has been cut into Europe. How long for? We don't know. Obviously, they're going to try and get that up and running as soon as possible. But this is adding to that entire situation within Europe, where we're looking at that energy crisis. There's not much, I should say, that's coming out that is making the situation better. Although Greta Thunberg came out overnight and said, maybe we should look at turning on more nuclear power plants. Thanks, Greta. Thank you. It's all okay. Greta's going to figure it out, guys. Everyone just take a back seat now. Greta's on the case. North Korea carried out simulated tactical nukes designed to hit and wipe out potential South Korean and US targets. So there was a whole series of missile tests that the North Korean military was firing off in the past, we were talking 2 days now. This is the tit for tat that's going on there. If in case people don't remember this, I talked about it last time. North Korea fired one and went over the top of Japan and went into the sea. So then South Korea and US, or the US sent a carrier down there and they fired off a whole heap of missiles into the ocean. Poor ocean. The ocean's like, oh, I've got nothing to do with this, you guys. Stop it. Stop firing your missiles into me. And then North Korea came out and was like, oh yeah? Well, I'll see your missiles and I'll throw more missiles out. And there's all these really funny photos of their beloved leader in like a sun hat and a white suit, just looking at missiles. I found it very funny anyway. Anyway, they then came out and said, hey, those missiles that were fired, they were actually simulated tactical nukes. So just so you know, that obviously increases things a little bit, where, we know they're firing it off and there's this kind of rumbling like, hey, they're going to test a nuke soon, which is a pretty big deal. But then they just came out and they said, yeah, all those missiles that were just fired off, yeah, they could have been nukes, just so you know. Things sliding the wrong way now in the Korean Peninsula as I'm looking at it. All right. Prices of wheat, corn, oats, and soybeans have retreated from highs earlier this year. So if you recall back, I want to say about March, and I was talking about this inflated food price because the Ukraine crisis kicked off and food prices went up through the roof. Everything went up through the roof. We're still feeling the effects of that. They actually started to peter off. And then these attacks from the last 2 days now in Ukraine, and just seen that steady line shooting up. Who knows where they go? Like, we'll have to see what happens within the Ukraine conflict in the next couple of days. But this is something, that I'm always looking at. I'm looking at food prices internationally. It could, because it affects everyone. We don't live in the world where, oh yeah, that's going to increase the price of corn over in Moldova. Corn increasing in Moldova increases food prices here in Australia. My tacos are going to be more expensive here in Australia. So that's why I keep an eye on this sort of stuff. Try and get ahead of those curves. Landslides and floods in Venezuela. As of this morning, the report I'm looking at here says at least 25 are dead, have been killed by it. I read another report this morning said 35. It's up to 35. Again, weather effects, landslides, thinking about where you live, how you position yourself, what sort of things you're going to need on you or in your home for weather effects. We, as human beings, as we have increased our population, obviously spread out into areas that we possibly wouldn't normally live in or haven't lived in before. And that is one of the reasons where we're going to feel the effects of these sort of weather events a little more harshly, in my belief. All right. Feel free to argue with me if you want, but That's my take on it. I think weather events are an important thing. And for people who are preparedness minded, especially like you're thinking emergency and disaster preparedness, one of the big things I'm always thinking about is weather events. I can't, to a certain extent, we can't mitigate or stop those events. They happen. One of the interesting things reports that I've been looking at about these recent attacks in the Ukraine are the human effects. So what people do afterwards and things like the cutting out of internet and how people freak out, phone cell networks being cut out, electricity dropping off, being cut out, and runs on certain things. So fuel had a run on it. There was huge lineups to go in to get fuel for vehicles. People really trying to get out of cities very, very quickly. It's all these sorts of things. I don't love to look at these things, but when I look at these things, I see these disasters. I go, right, look at how humans actually operate. Look at how they work, and look at the things that happen, because it helps us be better prepared if something were to happen to us. So these are the sorts of things. These are examples that I look at and go, hey, horrible situation, right? Bombs are going off in my city, or if you're in Kiev or Lviv or wherever you are, bombs are going off there, and I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. But then I look at I go, what lessons can we learn here? Look at what humans are doing. What lessons can we actually learn from these situations here? And it's this sort of stuff. Hey, if you think something's going to happen, get out of these areas quickly. Make sure that your car is filled with fuel. It's like, this is a nightmare scenario to me. This is kind of shit that wakes me up at 2 a.m. in a cold sweat, because I'm like, just had a nightmare that I was caught in some disaster and I got in my car and I only had that much fuel left. I'm like, oh God, please help alleviate the stress on Uncle Gads here. And make sure you keep your car fueled up. Half is the new empty is the saying that I like to give to people. Half is the new empty. Your car should never be under half full. This was an interesting side one that I came in. I'm like, okay. Stuff like this coming in. A top Russian official has claimed to Sky News Arabia that Ukraine is seeking to obtain nuclear weapons, which they were previously denied on. Obviously Russian propaganda, right? Obviously Russian, news cycle that's going on here, but it is still something interesting that they're putting out here. And I'm always like, okay, what's going on behind this news? Why is Russia putting out to an official from Russia putting out to a major news agency like, hey, we believe Ukraine is trying to obtain nuclear weapons. They're trying to obviously build up the threat to the world and say, like, look at what they're doing. Look at what Ukraine is doing. It legitimizes us doing X, Y, and Z. Again, these sort of tensions, especially when it comes around to nuclear weapons, I'm always like, God, no. Like, let's backpedal here. Let's go down here. Peter Rouse says, I have 5 gas cans on the roof of your car, I assume. I also have backup fuel jerrys. I don't. I might travel with 1 or 2 in the ute tray of my car, but generally they're stored in certain locations, which is also a great idea. But that still doesn't excuse anyone from not filling up their car regularly. Don't let it get down to the E. I don't want to see that light, that little low fuel light come on in your car. I don't want to hear about that. Ain't about that. China's actually come out and said no possibility of reconciliation. What they're talking about here is the US. So they are saying we are now officially in an economic war. If anyone's ever heard me talk about this sort of stuff before, that modern warfare is not about tanks and boots on the grounds necessarily. That's part of it, yes. But modern warfare includes social media. It includes economic sanctioning. It includes how a country decides to interact with another country. It includes life, everything. There is the battle space now is everywhere. And if you start to think about warfare like that, then we have been in a state of warfare with countries like Russia, with countries like China for years, for at least 5 years, I would say, if not longer. So it may be even classified as a Cold War, but it's definitely warlike activity that these countries have been conducting. And it's about time that we admit it. And so now it's starting to come out and it's being admitted, like, yes, some of the policies, some of the things that are happening between the US and China at the moment is war. That's actually what's happening here. So that's an interesting one. And I point that one out. I grabbed that one because I was like, hey, I like to open up people's minds to that idea a little bit. Warfare as we knew it is, that's why I think people are concentrating on the Ukraine warfare that's going on, or the war that's going on there so much, because it is the traditional one. I mean, you can wrap your head around it. And even if you listen to one side of it, it's the easy propaganda type war. It's like, here is the evil bad people, here is the good people, we're on the side of good, we must fight the tyranny of the evil people. And it's this really beautiful, easy story to listen to. It's all bullshit, obviously, but we can wrap our head around that. We can wrap our head around bombs going off and tanks moving around and all that sort of stuff. What we can't wrap our head around is the meme that I just looked at and chuckled and went, yeah, Biden, he's an idiot. And then go, wait a minute, who created that? Who actually benefits from me hating on that person? I do actually think that the guy is incompetent or not in a stable state of mind, but that's beside the point. This is actually where warfare is being fought now, in the hearts and minds through cyberspace. So that's something that I like to point out, because it's something we can start to guard ourselves against. If you don't know it's there, you can't guard yourself against it. So really start to think about that. I'm going to wrap up because I've got to get to work and stuff like that. But just quickly, a couple of other interesting things that popped up. The energy crisis in Europe is so bad that some people are thinking of using horse poo to heat their homes this winter. I mean, this is actually a legit technique. People have burnt dried poo for, donkey's years. It's something that actually happens. Just not generally countries that are considered some of the richest countries in the world. So, and that's what I'm talking about with Europe. Really, really interesting stuff that's coming out of Europe at the moment. I think this is only the tip of the iceberg. Again, I saw another story today about people freaking out in countries like Germany, runs buying up things like wood fire heaters, and wood is in some areas of Germany is almost impossible to get. They just can't get it in. People can't afford it. It's just, not there. So really interesting. People are starting, or officials in that country in Germany are starting to get worried that people are just going to start burning whatever they can. And yeah, they will. They definitely will. How's that nuclear looking? Maybe Greta was right. Hillary talked about a cyber propaganda force back in 2013. Yeah. Yep. Stuff's been around for a long time. Again, good book that I think people should read, The Shadow War by Jim Sciutto. It'll enlighten you to a lot of this stuff. Mass protests against NATO and EU hit Paris streets. Two reasons I'm throwing this one out. First being, protests again. Although, yes, let's pump the brakes on, another protest. It's in Paris, so it's what they do, right? Every other Friday, probably every Friday right now, Paris, they love a good protest. But the other reason I'm throwing this one out is protesting against NATO and EU. This very much is coming from the Russian propaganda machine, by the way, just so you know where I'm getting this information. So they want to show how fractious the EU is. But I don't disagree with it, that I'm sure there is a large cadre of people within Europe who are saying, hey, maybe we don't want to be part of this NATO thing right now. This is not trending in a good way. This is trending towards war, and there is very little that I'm seeing that proves to me that NATO actually doesn't want to go to war, that the US doesn't want to go to, or the US government doesn't want to go to war. When I'm saying these organizations, obviously, and countries, I'm fully aware that people within the US don't want to go to war. But parts of their government and parts that are leading the government clearly do. Tulsi Gabbard just came out and said, I'm out of the Democrat Party. I'm out. I'm done. And a few of the reasons she put out there for why she's leaving the Democratic Party of the United States is that they are warmongers and they're, I think, sycophantic woke culture within it. or something to that, something about wokeness. But yeah, I like that. That was a real eye opener for me. Again, I don't get too like tangled around US politics because it's not my country. And I watch a lot of people get really fucking up in arms about US politics. I'm like, oh, Trump was right, and we should all support Trump. I'm like, why? Why? I don't vote for Trump. I have to vote for Albanese or bloody Scott Morrison or whatever ass clowns in our vanilla politics over here. But anyway, I just thought it's interesting that we're seeing fractious, or the fractious nature of the EU, the fractious nature of NATO, and that sort of adds into it for me. Is it like, hi, we're even seeing this within US politics here? People who are going like, hey, where is that negotiation table? Why isn't that being talked about right now? And overnight too, like the one person the one sort of celebrity type person I saw talk about negotiations was Elon Musk of all people. I'm like, all right, General Musk, what do you got to say here, buddy? And I did think he actually had some good ideas. Well, that got shit on overnight, where they're casting a lot of shade on him, saying he actually talked to Putin before he put that post out. And I'm like, whoa, that was coming out of a relatively major news agency as well. And I'm like, have you verified that? And I would love to know how you verified that if you did, because that's a lot of shade to be thrown on someone right now. So yeah, that's what we're seeing there. Last little one that I'll just chuck up here before I'll leave you to get about your days. This one I'm going to categorize under the what the fuck is going on? France is to spend 100 billion euros to fight inflation. So do you understand how inflation works and how this all comes about? How this current inflation crisis that we're in has really been exacerbated by things like government spending, which ultimately increases things like has to increase things like taxation or increase debt, national debt, or increase both, which it has been. So this kind of idea that like, hey, we're just going to spend our way out of this hole. An E for effort. That's you came up with an idea. So yeah, all right, good for you. 100 billion euros to get ourselves to fight inflation. I think what's actually happening here is the general person, or I talk about this, and I'll categorize this one under this sort of area as well, where I'm starting to see this decline in the general IQ of human beings, or maybe the evaporation of common sense within human beings, in our like wholesale within our society. So people are like, oh, okay, Putin bad. Ukraine must win. Ukraine underdog. We give money to Ukraine, and we see every other week more money Ukraine, more money Ukraine, and people go like, oh, I feel good. I feel good. Are we doing good? Yeah, we're doing good. High fives, everyone. Yay, yay. Even though like you're just a person going about your day. So we give money to fight things. That's what we do. That's kind of how our society has become. Like, how do we solve a problem? Money. Let's throw money at it. What's this? Oh, we feel bad about something? Money. I feel guilty because of the color of my skin, or because of what our ancestors done. Money. Let's get money on the case. What? Inflation? Oh, that's another war we have to fight. Money. I'm gonna throw money at inflation. If you like get what I'm saying here, you should be chuckling and also crying at the same time as I was when I read that story. I was just like, I don't even know what to do anymore. No, I do know what to do anymore. We got to just like go our own way. Basically, we have to take control over our own lives. This is why I get up here and I say this shit on these mediums. It's not that I'm like overly motivated to be talking on the interwebs. I actually have much more motivation to not be on the internet at all, and was for many, many years. But it's stuff like this, and I'm like, hey, like, we got to start encouraging each other, and we got to start doing it ourselves, becoming more self-reliant human beings, and just not fucking interacting with this ass clownery anymore. This ass clownery en masse. So this is the sort of stuff that I look at and I laugh and I cry, and then I go, whew, more inspiration. That's what I'm taking away from this. More inspiration for me to take control of my own food sovereignty, my own energy sovereignty, of my own financial sovereignty as much as possible, and live as human beings are supposed to live, as we are created to live, as self-reliant human beings on our own 2 feet, taking care of ourselves and of each other within our own communities. Janufi says, I'm convinced we're living in bizarro world. Yep. Yes, we are. Welcome to the upside down. Any Stranger Things fans out there? All right, gang, that's it for today. I've got to go get ready, but I really, really, really appreciate every single one of you for joining, for jumping on, for listening to whatever you have listened to today, for all your comments, for all your input. I really appreciate it. Keep fighting the good fight, gang, which is just looking after yourself. Get your mind right. Maybe spend a few minutes today in quiet contemplation by yourselves. Bring yourself back down to earth and realize that all this sort of stuff that I talk about is not actually stuff that we can, or no amount of anxiety about that sort of stuff is going to change it. So work on yourselves today. Maybe do some push-ups, go for a jog or something. Eat some good food. Smile, laugh with a friend. Look into the face of a child and be happy. All right, gang, until next time, which I'm not sure when it will be. Again, very busy week for me, but I'll try and get one out when I can. Really appreciate you all. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open. Keep prepping, and Semper Paratus.